I went from unemployed with no income to millionaire in 1 year, 6 months, and 3 weeks. And here's exactly how I did it. I used to be a wedding videographer, so I would go around and I would film people's weddings for a living. But when COVID happened and lockdowns happened, people stopped having weddings. People stopped booking me. People stopped calling. And the clients that I already had either decided to outright cancel their weddings or they pushed them out 2 to 3 years in the future. And as a dad of 5 kids and with a wife who's a stay-at-home mom, I went from expecting to make $100,000 that year to overnight zero. I had rent to pay, I had food to buy, I had car payments, and I had ongoing business expenses. And slowly over the next couple weeks and months, I fell into like a really deep depression where I've talked about this before. I just started eating these waffles with chocolate chips in them all the time and just sitting around playing Minecraft, and I just didn't know what to do. My bank account was slowly getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I was getting just like terrified because I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. It had taken me 5 years to build that business. I poured my life into it. I poured everything I had into it, and then it was just gone overnight. And now I didn't know what to do. And eventually I just hit rock bottom, and my wife, she snapped at me and she's like, what are you doing with your life? What are you doing with your time? Like, you are better than this. She encouraged me to use this as an opportunity to reinvent myself, to face a bigger challenge than I've ever faced before, to go out and build something new. And as soon as she said it, I knew she was right. There was nothing healthy about what I was doing. There was nothing good that was gonna come out of me feeling sorry for myself and sitting on the couch playing video games. I had to figure out a solution. As hard and as difficult and as insane as the situation I was in, I needed to do something, and I needed to do it quick. Not knowing really where to start, I started using this app that allowed me to borrow audiobooks from the local library and started learning about successful people and just how they became successful in the first place. I had read somewhere that the average CEO reads like 60 books a year. So I figured, that must be important to being successful. So, that was kind of my idea about like starting to read books and different things like that. One of the first books I read was a book recommended to me by a friend called The 10X Rule. And in the book, the author talked about how you needed to come up with a dream so big that it made you just leap out of bed every morning, that you just threw off the covers, jumped out of bed and said, I'm ready to conquer today because I have this insane goal. I have this insane dream, and it is just motivating me to conquer every challenge that's in my way. And me coming out of a season where I was depressed and really feeling unmotivated, that really spoke to me where I was like, I need something like that. I need like a goal, a big goal that gets me motivated because I'm in a funk. So I started coming up with goals. My first goal was like $500,000. I want to make $500,000. But then I started thinking about it and I was like, you know what? $500,000 really isn't that much. I could run out of that pretty quick. So then I thought like $1 million. $1 million, and then I'll be set for life. And I started thinking about that too. And I was like, actually, it's pretty easy to run out of $1 million. And so it kept getting bigger and bigger to where eventually I was like $50 million. I want to make $50 million by the time I'm 35. If I had $50 million, I would literally never run out of money ever. Like I could spend money, could buy a house, and just throw a portion of that into like just the stock market or something. And I could live off the passive income from the interest I gain. And so 50 million became my goal. I wanted to make $50 million by the time I was 35. And I remember telling a friend soon after this, we were sitting in line to watch a movie, and I remember telling them that I had this crazy goal to hit $50 million by the time I was 35. And I remember them laughing at me after I told them that and just thinking it was the most ridiculous thing that they had ever heard. And honestly, I didn't blame them. Here I was, this unemployed dad of 5, saying that I wanted to make $50 million by the time I was 35. It even sounded absurd to me. But despite that, I just kept moving forward. And after those first few books, I just kept reading more and more books. I read books on marketing, I read books on success, entrepreneurship, psychology, mindset, and really literally everything in between. I was just trying to soak up as much knowledge as physically possible to help me, hit my goals. I didn't really know what else to do, but I knew when I was sitting there kind of trying to figure out a plan, I could at least listen to these books and maybe that spark some creative ideas or something. And during all this, I came up with this idea of video marketing. I had the skill set of making videos, and I'd been learning so much about marketing that I thought, what if I combine the two? I bet most people aren't good at both, and I bet I could make videos that are not only great, beautiful videos, but they're also great marketing tools.
Listen, we've got an incredible deal for you.
But as cool as that idea sounded, what ended up happening is, nobody was interested in hiring me. Like, I would pitch this idea and be like, hey, video marketing. And they're like, hey, I don't need it. And I tried so hard to make this happen, but nobody actually wanted to hire me. In fact, despite literally months of me working, 12 to 17-hour days, I never ended up making a single dime. And things ended up getting progressively worse and worse as my bank account kept getting lower and lower. And I had to end up applying for unemployment because I needed to feed my family and I needed to pay rent. And I didn't really know what else to do. And it was around this time I ended up reading this book by Gary Vee called Crushing It. And it was all about how social media is the new resume. And that if you wanted to have a successful business, you needed to first build out this personal brand that would allow you to succeed no matter where you went, no matter what businesses you started. During this book, he kept mentioning this app called TikTok and saying, you gotta get on TikTok. I'm telling you now, TikTok's gonna be the future. Not long after that, I ended up getting a call from this friend named Caleb. And he was telling me about how he'd started posting on TikTok. And he had absolutely blown up on the app and gotten to over 5,000 followers. And I remember talking to Caleb and being like, oh my gosh, Caleb, you are famous, bro. Like you gotta capitalize on this. Like, what are you doing? Are you gonna keep going? He's like, yeah, I'm gonna keep going. And I was like, you should do that. And he's like, you know what you should do? And I was like, what? And he's like, you should start posting too. Like you're really smart. You're learning all this stuff from these books. You should start posting on TikTok, teaching people what you're learning. And I was like, that's a really great idea, Caleb. And first Gary Vee's talking about TikTok, and now my friend Caleb's talking about TikTok. So I figured there must really be something to this TikTok thing. And so I started posting videos that same day about all the different things that I was learning. And it was wild because people actually liked the videos I was making. And soon I had 500 followers, and then I had 1,000 followers, and then I had 5,000 followers like Caleb. And then I went to 10,000. And during this whole time, it just felt surreal. The stuff that I was reading in these books was actually working. The stuff that Gary Vee had told me in his Crushing It book, I was doing it and it was actually working. And it was around August that I ended up hitting 40,000 followers. And despite how ecstatic I was that I'd made it that far, I was also still not making any income. And my bank account was at this point pretty much on its last leg. So I sat down and I tried to think of a thing that I could do that would both help me grow on TikTok and would help me actually pull in some income. So I came up with this idea where I do this epic challenge and I try to go from $1 all the way to $1 million. There was this other TikTok series where this girl had like a bobby pin and she was trying to trade up to a house. And I was like, well, I'll do kind of the same thing, but like with making money, because I really need to make money and it'll act as like, good content for TikTok. I called it the 1 to 1 million project. And in retrospect, I probably should have called it like the 0 income to $1 million project, because a lot of people were really big sticklers about the $1 thing, because they were like, well, you have a cell phone, that costs more than $1. You have a car, that costs more than $1. You have a computer, you have internet access, that costs more than $1. But the whole idea was that like I wanted to start in a place that if I ended up succeeding, everyone would be able to look at it and say, hey, if he could do it, anyone could do it. And although it's true, like not everyone has a cell phone or not everyone has a car to drive around, I would say most people in the US probably have access to most of those things. And most people don't have 5 kids that gotta support and all these business expenses that I ended up having. So I think it kind of averages out and still, kind of makes sense. Anyway, so I make this big video and I announce it to all of my 40,000 followers and say, hey, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna try to make $1 million in a year. They loved the idea. They're all commenting. They're like, oh my gosh, we're so excited to see what you do. And I realized during this moment that I actually didn't know what I was gonna do. I actually had no plan. In fact, I just spent the last couple of months just trying to make any money at all, and I'd failed at even doing that. But with all these people watching and the fact that I just announced it, I knew I had to do something. And at the time, I was reading this book all about cold calling. And so I figured, well, that's as good as any way to try to get some clients. And I decided I was gonna cold call 50 people every single day, and surely out of 50 people, 1 person would end up hiring me. And the goal I kind of set for myself that first week was I wanted to try to make $1,000 my very first week on this challenge. And after 6 days of cold calling people all day long, I ended up getting literally 0 clients. Nobody wanted to work with me. I was trying to pitch them on marketing services or photography or literally anything. I was like, I'd massage their dog if they would pay me to do it, but nobody wanted to hire me for anything. And by day 6, I can't really explain it, but I just kind of broke. I'd spent the last couple of months trying to make no income. I was failing. I just announced to 40,000 people I was doing this challenge. I was failing, and I just kind of got to this point where I was like, I'm literally willing to do anything to hit this $1,000 goal. And so I started just really thinking like, what can I do? Like, what can I do that I wasn't willing to do before? And I'd remembered that my friend Lucas had mentioned like offhand that he thought it would be like a cool, crazy thing. Like what if he had his own GIFs to send his clients? Like a GIF like is in like an animated picture. He's like, I always send like, you know, these other GIFs, but what if it was me in the GIF? And I was like waving at my client and we were laughing about it. It's like more of like oh, that'd be funny. But I was like, you know what? I'm gonna call up Lucas and try to sell him on some GIFs. And I ended up calling up Lucas and I pitched him on this idea. I said, Lucas, what if we did this photo shoot where I would take pictures of you and then I'll turn them into GIFs and I'll do it all for just $100. And I remember stopping talking and Lucas is on the other end of the line and he's kind of like sitting there and he's like, yeah. And then he just ends up saying,
yeah, sure.
And I was like over the moon. I was like, oh my gosh, I literally just made some money. I literally just brought in some income. But I quickly got over the excitement of bringing in $100, realizing that I still had another $900 to actually hit my goal. And I didn't really know what to do to hit that other 900. I'd been there thinking, and the only idea I could come up with was to call Lucas to see if I could make some gifts. So I decided my next best course of action was to start cold calling again and just hope that, you know, today was my lucky day, when suddenly my phone started ringing. And it was actually another person cold calling me. And this is a normal thing. Like if you own a business, you'll end up getting a ton of cold calls where all these other businesses like Yelp or freaking Yelp, it's always Yelp. I don't know why it's always Yelp. They'll end up calling you all the time and being like, hey, do you want to buy this? Or hey, like you want some SEO help? And I got so annoyed by this when I had my business that I actually bought this app that like blocked them all and like sent them to this crazy voicemail. But I ended up, you know, I was running out of money, so I had to cancel that subscription and I didn't have that app anymore. So now I was getting cold calls again. So this person cold calls me, this company called Clearbank, and they're trying to pitch me on this like e-commerce thing. And I remember thinking like, I'm just gonna hang up on this person because I literally have no time to waste. And then suddenly this wild idea popped into my head where I was like, wait a minute. In my line of thinking, I decided, you know what if I flipped the script and tried to pitch this guy on my vision, my goal, and my dream? It sounded ridiculous. It sounded like the stupidest idea ever, but I was literally out of smart ideas, so all I had was the stupidest idea ever. And so I figured he wouldn't hang up on me since he was the one cold calling me. And so I did. I flipped the script and I was like, yo, like here's my idea. I wanna make $1 million in a year. This is my first week. I'm trying to hit $1,000. Will you give me everything I need to hit my $1,000 goal right now on the phone? And this guy, like he didn't even know how to react. I don't think that anyone's ever asked him for money. And he was just like, he kind of sat there and he kind of stuttering for a second. And he's like, yeah. And I was just mind blown that that had worked, that I had asked a cold caller on the phone to give me money and they said yes. And from here, I grew the confidence that I actually stood somewhat of a chance of actually hitting this $1 million goal in a year. I figured if I could take a cold caller and get them to send me money, I pretty much could do anything at this point. And at this point, I also decided to like screw looking cool or trying to look like a legit business person or entrepreneur. I was just gonna hit my goals however the heck I could. So what I started doing is I just started selling literally everything that wasn't nailed down to the floor around my house. I sold my PS4, I sold a bunch of games, I'd sell like old clothes, I found some old books in my garage, sell those. I also started literally trying every single idea that somebody suggested to me in the comments. If somebody's like, you should try affiliate marketing, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try affiliate marketing, and I'd go out and try it. Somebody's like, you should try Facebook ads. I'm like, yes, I'm going to do that. And I tried, Google ads, I tried Pinterest ads. I tried just literally anything anyone would recommend. And keep in mind, I literally had no idea how to do any of these things. I'd never done any of these things. I just watched like a YouTube tutorial. I'd sometimes listen to a podcast and I'd be like, all right, I'm gonna go try this. And then I'd approach a business and be like, hey, I will run some Pinterest ads for you for free. All you gotta do is pay for the ad spend. And weirdly enough, like they didn't tell me to just go shove off and slap me in the face. Instead, they were like, yeah, let's give this a try. And free kind of became a pretty solid strategy for me. Like early days, this is pretty much how I got anything done, is I'd approach a business, be like, yo, I'll do this for free. And they almost always would be like, yes, we would love for you to do that for free. And that's how I learned a lot of these things and got to try a lot of these things, was by approaching businesses to do it initially for free. And while I figured out I wasn't that great at Facebook ads and I wasn't that great at Pinterest ads, by some miracle, I actually ended up being somewhat decent at Google ads. to the extent that the first client that had hired me ended up having to hire an additional person for their team to handle all the extra workload that these Google ads were bringing in. And so it was a pretty easy pitch to say, hey, like, will you start actually paying me for this now? They were really excited to start paying me for this and to continue the service. And Google ads became one of my first sources of, legitimate income in this journey. My second big win ended up coming from this postal mail strategy that I kind of made up and I kind of read about in this book, where we'd send out these postcards to my clients' dream, 100 clients. They were handwritten, they looked super cool. Sometimes they had like stickers on them. And the whole idea was that like those would really stand out versus like an email. And it ended up being a success, and I ended up getting 2 clients who were paying me monthly income to do this service. And around this point, I crossed the $10,000 mark in my journey, which just felt amazing. But I knew I had to keep hustling if I wanted to hit my $1 million goal. My third idea ended up coming out of a conversation me and one of my best friends, Lucas, had about all these restaurants that were struggling during COVID and how there must be some sort of opportunity to help these restaurants. And if we could figure it out, we're sure we could create a really successful business. So we approached a restaurant offering to build them a brand new website and take all these photos and do these videos. And in exchange, they would give us an inside scoop on how restaurants work, where the problem areas are, and hopefully in the process, we could find a viable business idea. And so we ended up making them a website. They ended up loving it. We got these photos for them. They ended up loving it. And they told us a little bit about their business. And during all this, we learned that they were paying this guy for marketing. And although they'd been paying him for multiple years on end, he wasn't doing that good of a job at marketing. At least we felt like we could radically improve on what he was doing and do a much better job. So we came up with this marketing plan and pitched that restaurant on becoming our first client. And weirdly enough, they didn't think it was the worst idea ever, and they ended up saying yes. And from there, I just kept going with different new side hustle experiments, and I would just try new ideas, rapid fire test them, and if they didn't work, I would just move on to the next idea, and if they did work, I would just double down on it. And with all of these different ideas and different things that I was making money at, my income just kept growing and growing and growing to where just 3 months into my journey, I had already made $36,000. And even though that felt insane, I knew I had to make a lot more money than that if I wanted even a chance at hitting my $1 million goal. And it was around this time I got recommended a book called 12 Months to $1 Million, which obviously the title, piqued my interest. And it was all about how you could build an e-commerce brand in 12 months and turn it into a $1 million business. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is the answer to all my problems. And by the end of the book, I was convinced that the only way forward for me was to build a $1 million e-commerce empire. And I decided to make as my first product a planner. I'd become obsessed with productivity on my journey and dreamed about designing the perfect planner. The only problem at this point was I had literally no idea how I would even go about hiring somebody to actually go design a planner. I didn't know, like, was there a Fiverr, you go on Fiverr and hire someone to design a planner, or like, is there like a site where you go to have someone design a planner? I looked around a little bit, but I couldn't really find somebody who like specialized in designing planners. So I decided, you know what, like, screw it, I'm gonna make this planner on my own. And I got on Canva and I literally spent like probably a week, like just massively long days, like 10-hour, 12-hour days for an entire week straight. And I would just like take literally every single line. I put in every little thing of text. I was using like all these rulers and tools to like make everything perfect and straight. And I built a planner from scratch. I then went on Alibaba, found a supplier, sent them over my designs, and ordered my first sample. And I'm making this kind of sound all really, really easy, but it was actually insanely hard. I had never done this before. I'd never done anything like this before. I was just like literally making this up as I went and just kind of guessing what to do next.
Hi, my friend, we can keep this will still be blank and add the blank pages to here.
After a few weeks, my sample ended up arriving. I got it. It was the craziest thing to hold in my hand, something that I'd physically designed on Canva. And because I was kind of on a timer trying to make $1 million in a year, I didn't really even have time to stop and think if like any of this was a good idea or what I was even doing. I just, as soon as I got my sample, was like, oh, this is cool. I told them I wanted to place an order and wired over $5,000 to China, hoping that it kind of just would all work out. And there's actually a lot more to this story. This is like a big part of my journey. I've made an entire video about it if you want to go check it out and go into more details on this whole part. Long story short, it ended up taking months for these planners to actually arrive. I ended up doing a pre-order and I was was able to make enough to cover the cost of like actually ordering the planners and a little bit of profit on top, but it wasn't even enough to like, really justify the amount of work that I had put into it. And it definitely wasn't enough to make a dent in my journey to making $1 million. So now I was stuck here waiting for these planners to arrive. I had been doing side hustles on the side and gotten to around $80,000, but with just 6 months left in the challenge, I knew that all the current things that I was doing, I had no shot of hitting my $1 million goal, and I had to radically switch strategies if I wanted even a chance of hitting that $1 million. It was also around this time that I ended up moving across the country. I moved from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast, and during that long drive across country, I listened to quite a few audiobooks, and 2 of the books I listened to were Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Richest Man in Babylon. And both of those books ended up having a massive impact on me and completely changing the way I thought about building wealth and about, bringing in income and that I thought about my journey. I was convinced that the path forward wasn't doing side hustles. It wasn't doing all these side businesses. It was taking all the capital that I'd made so far, investing it and putting it to work for me. And so I came up with this vision. I came up with this thing I called like the 4, I don't know what to call that. I'm sure it had a cool name, but we'll just call it the 4 strategies. And the first strategy was I didn't want to give up on my planners because it's taking so much time. So it's like, strategy number 1, maybe I could turn my planners into $1 million brand still by some miracle. Strategy number 2, I'm gonna invest in real estate because all the rich guys are like, real estate. I made millions on real estate. And so it just kind of seemed like maybe I should look a little bit into real estate. Strategy number 3 was I was gonna trade options and puts and try traditional finance out. And strategy number 4 was I was gonna invest in crypto. And crypto investing ended up being the first thing I decided I was gonna tackle. I'd already done some previous crypto investing back in 2017. I'd made a lot of money and then I'd lost a lot of money, but I felt like I had learned a lot of lessons along the way. And I had read a lot of different newsletters and articles and I watched so many thousands of hours of videos about cryptocurrency that I felt like I really had a leg up when it came to investing in cryptocurrency versus the other 3 strategies. So I started off my crypto investing strategy with just like really easy things. I was investing on Coinbase and I was using this app called Stoic. It was all pretty basic, but I was making a pretty decent amount of money to where pretty quickly I was able to cross the $100,000 mark. After I'd gotten kind of comfortable with cryptocurrency, the second strategy I decided to explore was land flipping. It was like my way of doing real estate investing because I was like kind of nervous about buying an entire house and I didn't have the money to buy an entire house. So I was like, well, I'll buy land and I'll flip it. And I read 2 books on it. I even bought a course on it and watched this course on how to land flip. And they were promising that I could make millions of dollars doing this. So I was like, okay, people don't lie on the internet. I could definitely make millions of dollars doing this. I ended up doing this strategy that I learned about where you take these mailers and you just mail them out. You mail them out to people that have property off market. And the goal is, maybe you'll mail 100 and out of the 100, like 3 people will be like, hey, you can buy my property for like some really weird, obscure reason. Like, I don't know what, for whatever reason, they'll sell you your property because it's just the right time or whatever. So I did this. I bought this program called REI Conversion. I was like sending out these automated mailers every single day. And I was just hoping that somebody would mail me back and say, hey, I'm going to sell you my property for way lower than market value. And eventually I actually did get some letters back. I got quite a few letters back and people were, some people were really mad at me and wrote some really unkind things on those letters, but other people were willing to sell me their land. And I ended up kind of doing research on each, little parcel. And I found one that looked like the ideal piece of land to buy. I signed it, sent it back. We did the whole little deal. And I ended up acquiring my first piece of land to flip. Anyway, this is what it looks like. And it's way cooler than I thought it was. I own this. You see this leaf? I own this leaf.
Daddy, why
I'm
are
just like,
owning everything that's here?
that's exactly the question I was just asking myself. And so after that, obviously I wanted to list the land for sale. So I started posting it everywhere. I even paid for some spots to post this land. And weirdly, nobody wanted to buy it. So that was kind of a bummer because, I was hoping I just list it and it'd sell within the first week, but a week went by and then 2 weeks went by and then 3 weeks went by. And for some reason, nobody wanted to buy this piece of land. So that kind of sucked. So while I was waiting for this land to sell, I tried doing options and puts and this whole little strategy. I wasn't very good at it, so I kind of gave that up pretty quick. And also around this time, I ended up getting finally my shipment of planners. It was a ridiculous amount of boxes, way more than I thought it was gonna be. It ended up taking over my entire bedroom was like just planners for a little season there. I ended up packing all the orders, shipping them out from the pre-orders. And I was kind of hoping that that'd be the moment that it sparked to life. Like I had the planners, people know I have the planners, and suddenly people start buying them out of nowhere. I didn't know where I expected them to buy from. I expected a miracle at this point, and the miracle never came. There was no miracle that happened when my products ended up showing up. It was more like I made a couple $100 and that was that. And really the only thing during this whole season that was really working for me was cryptocurrency. And it wasn't just working, like it was dominating. I've been able to, investing in crypto, go from $100,000 to over $130,000. It felt like literally every other day I had some crypto like doubling in value or tripling in value. It's just raining money all over the place. And at this point, I had less than 4 months to go. I knew I had to make big moves if I wanted to hit that $1 million goal. And so with sort of a mix of like, you know, all this excitement from making a bunch of money from crypto and a mix of like really trying to hit my deadline, I ended up doing something that in retrospect ended up being really, really, really dumb. I took out massive leverage against my crypto. If you don't know what leverage is, it means I took out a massive loan against my crypto, which ends up being a good thing if the prices keep going up. But if like the prices were to fall, it ends up being a really not so good thing for me. But at the time, it seemed like a smart idea. I was taking $1,000 and turning it into $2,000, but I knew I needed to be taking, you know, 10,000 and turning it into 20 if I wanted even a chance of hitting that $1 million goal. And I wasn't stupid. I knew it was really, really risky. I just knew like, you know, in 4 months, if I want to make $900,000, I kind of had to do something somewhat risky, you know, to get there. So I did it. And I kid you not, literally the very next day, the day after I'm like, boom, leverage all my crypto, massive move. The very next day, the entire crypto market just absolutely plummets. And when I say plummets, I'm not talking about like it did a little dip. I'm talking about like earth-shattering, plummeting, like just the biggest red candle I've ever seen in my life. And those were just some depressing weeks for me. I literally couldn't have timed that situation any worse. It was just like the biggest slap in the face I'd ever experienced in my entire life. And I ended up losing tens of thousands of dollars, to where at one point my $130,000 dropped below $100,000. And while I kind of wanted to like take a moment to like catch my breath because I felt like I'd just gotten the wind knocked out of me, I really had no time to even stop because like the clock was ticking. I just lost a bunch of money and I had to hit my $1 million goal, so I just needed to come up with something else, I guess. So I tried to focus back on Google Ads, land flipping, and to heavily focus on YouTube. For this point in my journey, YouTube was more of an afterthought. I would sometimes post a video once a week, sometimes it was once every 2 weeks, sometimes it was once a month. And despite a year of kind of grinding on YouTube and promoting it on my TikTok, I had only been able to get to around 4,000 followers on YouTube. But during that entire process, I ended up falling in love with YouTube. Like I ended up wanting to, like more than anything, become a YouTube creator. I knew if I could grow my YouTube big enough, it could not only become a great source of like income, but also it would open up a world of opportunities. So I became razor focused on YouTube. I started listening to all these podcasts. I started watching all these videos about how other creators had grown their channels. I started like playing around with thumbnail variations and learning about how to create the perfect thumbnail. And I think from the outside looking in, I had a lot of entrepreneur friends who thought I had just like gone crazy. I only had a couple months left to hit my $1 million goal, and I was investing about half my time into growing my YouTube channel. But I kept thinking about Gary Vee's book about building a personal brand, and I just knew that YouTube was the path forward for me, that YouTube in the future, if I could build it up, would become one of the greatest assets I owned. And during this time, I ended up getting somebody who wanted to buy my land, and I ended up accepting the offer and selling it to him for double what I bought it for. And a lot of people saw this and were like, Jesse, like obviously you need to go all in on land flipping. And other people were saying like, Jesse, you're killing it at Google Ads. You need to go all in on Google Ads. But for whatever reason, in my gut, I knew that like I didn't like either of those things. Like neither of those things like inspired me or like made me pumped up. But YouTube, that got me pumped up. Crypto, that got me pumped up. So I sat down with my wife and I said, hey babe, like I know we're not bringing in any income from YouTube. I know that it just kind of seems dumb, but I want to go all in on YouTube. I want to give this everything I have. And she totally supported me, and I ended up getting rid of all of my Google Ads clients but one, and I stopped land flipping, and I just went all in on YouTube and crypto investing. And that's what I did all the way until my year was up. And although I had made some pretty insane gains on my crypto investments, I hadn't gotten anywhere close to my $1 million goal. I had only made it to $147,343. On one hand, I was really bummed about this. I had put in a lot of effort. I had fought really hard. I had made some crazy moves and taken some heavy hits trying to hit that $1 million goal, only to fail and only make it to 147,000. But on the other hand, I also realized how insanely far I had made it. My original mission and goal was just to be able to provide for my family. It was just to be able to pay my rent and pay my car payments. And not only had I done that, but I had made more money than I'd ever made in my entire life. But even so, I really wanted to complete this challenge. I knew I could do it, and I wanted to prove I could do it. I wanted to prove that I was on the right track, and I did not want to stop just because my 1 year mark was up. So I decided I was gonna continue on my journey, and I was gonna still try to hit that $1 million goal, no matter how long it took me. I didn't care if it took me 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. I was gonna be a millionaire. I was gonna prove that I could do this. And the most awesome part of all this is now that I didn't have this timer constantly looming in the distance, I was able to really slow down, focus, and make sure I did this next part right. So I started focusing on nothing else but YouTube and my crypto investing strategy. And for crypto investing, I started focusing on crypto projects that were really, really small, but that had a lot of potential for growth. I tried crazy ideas like Strong Block and Olympus DAO, and I ended up making a lot of money with both of those. And I also tried crazy ideas like Time Wonderland and Tai Chi DAO, and I ended up losing a lot of money with those. And even though I wasn't winning with every project, I was consistently profitable and making way more money than I was losing. And just like everything else on my journey, I started reading books about investing. I started studying strategies. I started testing and experimenting and trying new ideas. And I had a few key concepts that really helped me succeed when it came to investing. One of the big paradigm shifts for me was learning that investing is sort of like a competition. It's sort of like a sport. Every time I lose money, somebody else made money. And every time I make money, somebody else lost money. So in my mind, that meant if I could improve my strategies and my knowledge, I could improve my odds of winning more often, and I could decrease my risk. I was thinking it was just like a big game of chess or something. Like I have my opponent across from me, I'm playing my strategy, and the better I get at chess, the more money I make. I had also learned that with things like venture capital, 9 out of 10 investments were actually failures. They actually lost money on the majority of investments they made. But out of the 1 or 2 that they had succeed along the way, they ended up making enough to cover all the losses they had sustained, plus a massive profit. And soon, all my focus and hard work on building my YouTube channel and growing my investing skills ended up paying off. To where by November, I had crossed $181,000. By December, I had crossed $240,000. And by January, I had crossed $440,000. With the majority of that coming from my crypto investments, I was making a lot of money from my YouTube channel. One month I made $10,000, another month I made $17,000 from my YouTube channel. Around now, I make around $3,000 from my YouTube channel each month. So I was making a decent amount from my YouTube channel as well. But the majority of my income was coming from my crypto investing. Unfortunately though, around December and January, the crypto market started to tank again, and a lot of investments weren't doing very good. But despite that, I was still actually making not only a little bit of money, but a ridiculous amount of money. And all of that really just came from a handful of investments, with the biggest one by far being Titano. Which with Titano, I had only invested $3,500 into it, but it had grown so massive to where at one point it was worth over $244,000. I had also had another project called Terra Luna where I'd invested $760 into it, and that had grown to over $130,000. And both of these wins were huge indicators to me that these strategies I was following weren't just theories, but they actually worked in practice. And things from here just ended up kind of snowballing out of control. I ended up finally leveraging some of the influence I'd built on YouTube, and I started this business helping crypto projects. That ended up being a huge success, a new source of income, and there ended up being such a heavy workload for it that I ended up having to hire multiple team members to help me manage it. I had multiple investments just absolutely skyrocket out of nowhere, to where by early March, I'd made $937,423. And every time I thought that these investments would slow down or stop growing, they just didn't. They kept growing up, to where today, I currently have $1,692,041. Not only crossing my $1 million goal, but absolutely exploding past it. And in total, it took me just 1 year, 6 months, and 3 weeks to go from unemployed with no income to millionaire. From here, I'm just gonna keep going. My next goal is 5 million, and then after that, 10 million, and maybe one day I'll cross that $1 billion mark. How insane would that be? Zero income to billionaire, and you can watch the entire journey. And on a last note, a big part of my journey was I wanted to inspire other people to show them what they could do when they picked a crazy, insane goal. They put in a crazy amount of work, they really challenged and pushed themselves, and they tried to tackle and accomplish that goal. For me, the best part wasn't making $1 million, and it wasn't even, building this massive audience on YouTube. The best part was challenging myself and seeing really what I was made of. Having this bold, crazy vision and seeing that I was actually capable of accomplishing it was the coolest part of this entire journey. If this video has been helpful, make sure to hit that like button. If you have any questions or comments or want to just share that, hey, you're gonna start your own journey to try to make $1 million, let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more videos like this or you want to see future updates, make sure you hit that subscribe button, but you got to also hit the little bell next to it. If you don't actually hit the bell, you won't ever know when I release a video. You have to hit that bell if you want to know when I release a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.